Welcome back to another MOTOBOB video and welcome to the international press launch of this, the Ducati Diavel V4. Now cut straight to the chase, this is an incredible motorcycle, and so here are my 10 favourite features and also one reason at the end that you might not want to buy one. Now number one is this new V4 engine that replaces the 1260 V-twin in the previous gen Diavel, and admittedly it's not the full power V4 that you get in the Street Fighter and Panigale, but rather the Gran Turismo version that you'll also find in the Multistrada V4. That means it focuses a little bit more on mid-range and usability rather than top-end revs, and it also switches out the Desmo valve system, which does help with that reviness, but it requires a lot of maintenance, so the service intervals on this bike are much longer. But look, despite the fact that it isn't that full top-end revvy version, it still makes absolutely boatloads of power for a bike of this nature. Whether you consider it a cruiser or not is possibly up for debate, but it does have a very comfortable riding position and that longish wheelbase, and so if you do, then it really is unlike any other cruiser that you're likely to ride. There's plenty of mid-range to go at, and it's really easy to ride and usable at lower speeds, but when you do get a chance to open it up, there's plenty of power up above 6,000 or 7,000 RPM that just makes it an absolute blast to ride on the roads like we've been on today. Now there are some interesting technical features in this engine, like the counter-rotating crank that helps with handling and agility, but also their extended rear cylinder deactivation system that was first seen in the Multistrada V4 Rally. Basically the idea is that below 4,000 RPM, when you're not asking too much on the throttle, it's just the front two cylinders that are firing and delivering the power, and then when it does go above 4,000 RPM, or if you ask a little more of the throttle, the rear two kick back in seamlessly. It's absolutely not noticeable, and then you're going to get the full ferocity of this engine. Why have they done it? Well, it helps to keep the saddle and this sort of area nice and cool, which of course helps with comfort for the rider, and also it means it's going to consume a little less fuel. So if you're cruising along at a steady speed, these two cylinders on their own are going to drink less fuel. It's really cleverly done, and the reason it's in my favorite things is just the way that they've done it seamlessly. You don't notice it. You can hear a little bit of difference in the sound from the exhaust, but there's absolutely no jump or stepping power like you might have heard of with the old Honda VTECs. Now number three I've got here is the sound. Admittedly it's a little bit muffled with the stock exhaust, but there is an accessory race pipe that looks pretty interesting in the accessories catalog, and even with this one, you know, that V4 sound, there's a little bit coming through the airbox as well. It's just a brilliant soundtrack for sporty riding. Now number four is the weight. You may have noticed they've got rid of the trellis frame versus the previous gen Diavel, and that's just one of the features that's helped them shave 13 kilograms versus the 1260S. Instead it gets the same front frame design as some of the other V4 bikes, so the engine is the majority of the bike structure, and then up here at the front you've got an aluminium monocoque that's bolted to the engine and holds the headstock, and then the subframe and the swing arm mount directly to the back. If you compare that to any other bike that you may consider to be somewhat similar, something like the Triumph Rocket 3, it's an absolutely huge difference, and really there's nothing like this bike that even comes close. The result is something that handles almost like a super naked, but just with that super comfortable riding position. Up front you've got a chunky 50mm fully adjustable fork. There's a monoshock from Sachs at the rear as well, and although later down the line I'd expect a V4S version that gets Öhlins fully adjustable semi-active electronic suspension, you know, this does a perfectly good job of striking that balance between comfort and handling, and of course you've got the adjustability to fine-tune it to your tastes. On top of that you've got proper good superbike spec braking, courtesy of some big 330mm discs, and then the Brembo Stylema calipers, plus the decent Pirelli Diablo Rosso 3 tyres. I mean, you will be a little bit limited for choice with the 240mm rear, but the stock tyres are decent, and all round I'd say the hardware that comes on this bike is perfectly up to the job, and it accelerates and stops and turns much better than it looks like it's going to. Now I also really do like this riding position. It's probably the most comfortable yet seriously quick bike I've ever ridden, and naturally you've got the wide and swept back flat bars that you'd expect to find on this style of bike, and also a big tractor style wide seat. But for me, the big one is the foot peg position. It's a mid peg position, maybe a little bit further back than some of the mid peg cruiser style bikes like Harley's, and that just means you feel like you can ride it in a more sporty manner, and it suits the whole personality of this bike perfectly. One caveat is that we've basically been just going up and down this closed road that's super fun to ride, and it really shows off the handling, but we didn't sit on the motorway for 2 hours at a time, so I can't really comment on stuff like pressure in the saddle and whether it'd be a good touring bike, but certainly for shorter, sportier rides, I really love how this bike's set up. Same on the tech front as well. I mean, if you're given the opportunity to ride this bike in that way, you're going to take it with both hands, and you're not really going to be sitting there with cruise control on or fiddling with the Bluetooth connectivity. But the tech features I did get the chance to check out, I really like. So the riding modes, you've got sport, touring, urban and wet. Largely today we've been going between touring, which is a little bit more chilled out and gives you a bit more ABS and TC intervention, and then the sport mode just livens things up and really gives you the full sporting experience. The TFT dash is plenty bold and clear even in these very bright conditions, and also the quick shifter, which really does add to the experience of riding this bike, and it's super crisp as you'd expect from a company that builds like the Panigale. Now number 8 would be the styling. I'm not quite sure if I think it's as good looking as the previous gen Diavel with that beautiful trellis frame and stuff, but look, if you just look at it in isolation, I think it's quite a spectacular looking bike, especially in this red. Really, it's not something that's designed to be subtle, and so I do like some of the more bold features like the big fat rear tire and that diamond cut rear wheel, and also even that quad exit exhaust, which is I'd consider that a bold move from a styling perspective. I've kind of grown to like it the more I've been around the bike and taken photos of it and ridden it. I also really like the lighting on this bike, specifically this tail light under here. It's a really bold design choice. They call it like a double C, and it's also repeated in the shape of the daytime running light at the front here. It is quite functional as well. The whole thing lights up when you pull the brake lever, so it's very noticeable if someone in front of you is braking, and it also has like an emergency braking feature where it flashes. So yeah, it really does make the back end of this bike look distinctive and interesting. Maybe it's a bit of a pain to clean, I'd assume. You might have to get the toothbrush out, but I wouldn't let that spoil the fun. And then also these indicators that have scrolling lights, and they're also mounted up on the bars here. Maybe took me a little while to get used to, but I think I like the cleanness of them as well, instead of having something sticking out on the side here. And then 10 is the sort of neatness of the back end here. So you've got the folded out foot pegs, which makes it look super clean when it is in a sort of single seat setup. Also the grab rail is retractable, so it's tucked away there with this single seat cowl on, and that means that you can quickly convert it between a sporty and clean looking single seat setup, but also a decent 2-up bike with a sturdy grab rail and quite a wide passenger seat there. Now I will say this bike probably isn't going to be to everyone's taste. Ducati themselves say it's part superbike, part super naked and part cruiser, and so perhaps it falls in between for some people. But if you are looking for something fast and yet at the same time like incredibly comfortable, then this is one of the best propositions on the market. The factor I mentioned earlier though that might stop you buying one is of course the price, £23,595, which it has to be said is a very substantial amount of money. It's more than some of the bikes that you might consider its competition. It's more than some bikes that can deliver similar amounts of thrills, and also it's quite a big step up from the previous gen. But look, it's a bike that is meant to be special, it is meant to be premium, and it doesn't really compromise in any area. The engine is incredible. They've given it the best weight and handling in the category. It gets tech galore, and then distinctive styling that does let you know that this bike is something special. So if you can afford it, I absolutely 100% understand why you might want to spend 23 grand on one. As always though, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below, so do let me know. And if you want to see my review of its adventure bike sibling, the Multistrada V4, and you haven't seen it already, then I'm going to link to it on the screen here. Give it a click, give it a watch, let me know what you think of it. A massive thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Can you get through here? Thanks, mate.